Hello and welcome back to Wellness with Delaney. Today we are chatting all about sleep. I have Molly Eastman. She is a sleep educator from Sleep is a Skill. And the whole concept today is that sleep is actually a skill that we can develop. So if you're somebody that struggles to either get enough sleep or to get enough quality sleep, or you just want to start hacking your sleep to feel amazing and refreshed every single day, this is the episode for you. Molly, thank you so much for joining.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. And thanks for helping to get this information out around sleep. We need all the help we can get to really help ensure that people are learning more about this thing that we do a third of our lives. On average, 26 years are spent asleep. And many of us don't have a lot of skill set in this area.
Wow. Yeah. I am excited for this selfishly too. Because let me tell you, I am a little over halfway at the time of recording this, a little over halfway done with my second trimester of
Okay.
pregnancy. And sleep is a commodity at this
Yeah,
point. So I'm like really
I get
excited to
that.
get all of the skills. I know my husband struggles with sleep. I know pretty much everyone in my life has at some point
Yes.
complained about sleep. So I know that this is a very common issue, and I've been
It is.
dying to get someone on here to chat about it. So
Yay.
my first question is, because I think that people are very confused about this, myself for a long time as well. Are you saying that like insomnia is not an inherent trait? It's actually maybe like a habit?
Mm, love that. Yes, because you're really leading into this whole concept of sleep being a skill, and you're kind of dissecting all of this beautifully and demonstrating that it's not just like, oh, well, for some people it is, but those insomniacs, sorry, or for, everyone else you can sleep, but if you got sleep apnea, no good for you. No, it's a stand that we're taking that everyone can live a life where they can sleep and sleep well consistently, and that includes insomnia, and there are trainable things, learnable things that we can all do to make a difference in those areas. And when we're talking about insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, there's that we might address it a little bit differently, but it's all about that education and relationship to our sleep. And I think that's so empowering, because I was someone that had a lot of fixed labels and narratives about my sleep, because I got into this because I went through my own sort of dark night of the soul with insomnia over a decade ago, and it changed the whole course of my life. But until I went through that, until I learned to kind of have this new relationship to my sleep, I thought I was just fixed like that. Like it was just, oh, I'm a short sleeper. I'm a night owl. It's in my genes. I'll sleep when I'm dead. But all of those were not accurate, not real. And it turned out that there were things that I could be doing directly to make a difference with those results. So, yes, if we're dealing with insomnia, difficulty falling asleep, staying asleep, we can absolutely learn and train things to make a difference. Now, there's always going to be certain periods of our lives that will be clear sleep disruptors to a certain extent. So, pregnancy, young children, etc. There's going to be certain things that will be pecking at our ability to have that kind of sleep that maybe we had been used to for a stretch of time, but it doesn't at all mean that there's not things that we can always do to up level the quality, the quantity, the reliability, the consistency in different ways, even in the face of that.
Hmm. Okay, I'm so excited to dig into all of this. And I think for some people, they might not even realize that they're getting poor sleep, right? Especially if you're somebody who is like waking up a lot throughout the night. I've
Yeah.
heard of people doing sleep studies and finding out they're waking up like 100 times and they didn't even realize they were. So
Yeah.
if somebody is experiencing that, like let's say they're a horrible sleeper or
Yeah.
really struggling, but they don't even realize it, what would be some of the symptoms when they're awake that maybe they're not getting the quality of sleep that they should be getting?
Good question. I'm so glad you noted that, because we see that all the time where people they're like begrudgingly take these sleep tests and say, "Ugh, this is not for me, this is not my problem." And then they come back with just insane amounts of sleep disruption. And it could be for different reasons. So it can be for snoring, sleep apnea, upper air resistance syndrome, but it can also be a lot of movement. So they might have like restless leg, periodic limb movement disorder, bruxism. There's a lot of things that could be at play. So on the flip side, how might we spot some of that? Um, Well, if we're talking about sleep apnea, people might have kind of this avatar of what they think of for someone that looks like they have sleep apnea. So for a long time, it was like this overweight male with a big neck. And, we had this image of what this looked like. But it turns out that while weight can play a role in certain types of apnea, not all, but so that can be true. If we do kind of shift and gain weight, we could develop apnea where there was no apnea before. But also, we're seeing that for women, especially as we age and as we get past around, say, like 40 or so, we become more one-to-one with our likelihood of developing some of these sleep disorders to that of men. So that's an important call out, because in the past, people might have thought, oh, well, it's just more male dominant, but turns out that that's not as true at all. And then, so across the board, so all genders could be dealing with more kind of marked and extreme fatigue. Are you the person that's falling asleep when the movie's on and it's loud and whatever, but you can fall asleep anytime. A lot of people wear this as a badge. They say, I don't need to listen to this episode because I can fall asleep anytime, anywhere, the minute my head hits the pillow, and they're so proud. But those are often the like red flags that we really want to check those people, because if things are working, there should be a really solid stretch of sleep-wake dichotomy. So there should be the wake period, and then as you're easing off into sleep, it's a bit of the sleep latency time should be present, where it's maybe 10, 15 minutes or so to actually transition from a fully awake brain state to this magical other realm of sleep. And it takes some time for the brain to shift into that, unless you're markedly sleep deprived or dealing with sleep disorders or common reasons. So those things, also waking with morning headaches, being told that you are snoring a lot by your partner, or if you can use something like the Snore Lab is a app that you could download. You could do that tonight and see, is there a snoring present? And then, are we waking with dry mouth? Are we even kind of soreness in our jaw, like if we've been dealing with bruxism or teeth grinding, which can all be related to airway health? Are you finding that you're moving a lot? So if you're tracking too, or just subjectively, but if you're tracking on wearables, is there a lot of movement ticks or dings on your wearables, or the kind of restfulness hits? And because really most of sleep is meant to be somewhat paralyzed, certainly during REM and during deep sleep, just this really slowing down of the body. So if we are seeing tons of movement, that can be a sign that something's impairing our ability to get into the rich sleep staging. And then if we're also seeing anxiety, irritability, kind of some of these mood impactors, and certainly I know that can be harder to spot, but if you start to see clusterings of some of these things at play, then absolutely we want to test. Now, I'm bullish. I want to see everyone tested, not just once, but multiple times. The same way you go to an annual physical or what have you, and they look at your blood pressure. You wouldn't just check your blood pressure one time in your life and then make all kinds of decisions. Sleep apnea or some of these sleep disorders are also dynamic largely. So there might be times where they're really severe and less severe based on things that we're doing, environments, etc. So at least testing once, but ideally multiple times throughout the course of your life.
Okay, this is really good to know. And I personally really want to get tested. I never have,
Yes.
But especially in this season, sleep is like so much harder to experience in a quality way. And I'm sure we'll get into that. But I think that's really fascinating. And it's a really good reminder for people. Like if you're feeling tired, if you're feeling like you're reaching for that second, third cup of coffee, let's look at your sleep. Okay, so then kind of going into your story, because I didn't know that you actually started with your own insomnia journey. Yes. And I feel like everyone who has a niche in wellness does have some sort of like origin story, which totally. I love, like the good hero origin story. Yeah. So for you, what path did you go down to get better sleep?
Oh, yeah. Well, I think it can help people to know that I did everything not to do for my sleep. I did everything wrong. And so for a bunch of years, I just kind of started to get more and more resigned to, well, I guess I'm just a bad sleeper and it must be in my genes and all, those labels that I shared. But it kept getting more and more pronounced, and more as I would deal with more and more anxiety and more stressors. Then I was finding myself having a harder time falling asleep, harder time staying asleep. I'm taking like over the counter sleep aids and all the things. And just sleep was not guaranteed. And I started to just think that that's, I guess, how it was for me. But it wasn't until I went through this whole period of insomnia, true marked chronic or acute insomnia, that everything changed, because suddenly I could just not function because I couldn't reliably fall asleep, stay asleep. And so there'd just be nights of just stretches of like nothing or very little sleep. And this was when I was traveling internationally with my husband. We've been together 15 years. And so at kind of the beginning of our relationship, we had read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week and decided to put everything in storage. And we're going to travel the world, but we were two serial entrepreneurs in Manhattan, stressed out, employees, a lot of responsibilities, and just the amount of stress, and then adding travel and the uncertainty of all that into the mix was just a lot. And so right away, then suddenly I'm not being able to sleep, and everything's kind of unknown because we don't know, where are we going next? What Airbnb? What's happening? And so I start then having this really poor relationship with my sleep, where I start trying to just get sleep anywhere I can. I start fixating on sleep. Then I'm going to spend so long in bed to try to just squeeze out, a few hours. And all of it made sense in my head. And that's what we see for a lot of people when they start going through more acute periods of insomnia. They say, oh, I'm going to go to bed so early. I need sleep. I need sleep. Or they'll say, oh, I finally fell asleep at like 4 a.m. So now I'm going to sleep in later to try to just grab a few more hours. But then you start creating this whole whirlwind where the body has no clue what time it is, what to be doing when, because in our body are trillions of clocks in virtually every cell and organ in our body, all kind of managed by this suprachiasmatic nucleus in kind of our master clock, and just located right behind the eyes. And it's part of why light-dark cycling is such a big impactor on our circadian health, because of its proximity to the eyes. But that aiming to stay on time got all obliterated for me. And so I went to the doctors, and this is in Croatia of all places, and left with sleeping pills, prescription for sleeping pills, and no plan, and just a real terror for me at the time, because I came from a family of a lot of mental health issues, bipolar, schizophrenia in the family. And, so my fear was always like, am I going to develop these things? And I saw so many of them taking so many of these types of pills, the benzos, so Xanax, Ambien, and Z drugs of like Ambien and what have you. So when that happened for me, it was really fearful of, well, what are we doing here? Am I just going to be hooked on these? Am I going to have to keep taking more to have the same effects? Like, what is the plan? And yet I still wanted to sleep. So I'm desperate, so that I know I'm going to still take these things. But I started to really discover that if I was going to figure this out, I'm going to have to do it myself, is what it's occurring as. So then I start going down the rabbit hole, discovering all I can around the world of sleep. And actually we went home early because we had like a one-way ticket. We're going to keep traveling. And we went back truly to deal with my sleep and figure that all out. And I did have some health things at play too, that were certainly not helping anything. I had a parasite. I had some other mold issues and other things. But I think a lot of what was fascinating for me was this world of chronobiology, the science of time and how time affects our biology, circadian biology, quantum biology, and this world of how we're setting up our days is impacting our nights and vice versa. So what was really transformative was this kind of moment when I started to restore the workability of my sleep, and then really realizing the more I learned, like, why are we not all talking about this? This is so crucial. I mean, it was part of even the reason that I moved down. I'm in Austin now, and had used to be the home base was always in the Northeast in New York. I grew up in Maine, went to school in Syracuse, all these kind of hard winters. And started becoming this sun-seeking person to be able to live a lifestyle where I could be outdoors more frequently, and just how much of a difference that kind of becoming an outdoor creature, that circadian aligned lifestyle can really win the day for our sleep.
Okay, I love this. And I love that you went into light, 'cause that was literally my next question for you.
Beautiful. Yeah.
So, when it comes to circadian rhythm and our relationship with light, why is it important that we're getting outside? What times in the day does it matter for us to get outside? Like, how do we use the sun to optimize our own sleep?
Yes. An app I love for this that can help guide because the topic of light is fascinating and it could warrant like 27 episodes, like if you really get into the physics of it, and it's really wild. So an app that can kind of be a shortcut is called the My Circadian app. And it's really helpful because depending on where you are on the globe and what time of year it is and the weather and the what have you, it's going to kind of create this whole bio individual, map for you because depending on your Fitzpatrick scale, so the where you fall on your skin tone and kind of haplotype and background of your family tree, if you will, that's going to impact how much time you need outside and how much that will play a role in many, many aspects of health and well-being, including, of course, vitamin D, which many of us are deficient in. But that's crucial to be able to create serotonin and melatonin. So a big part of the sleep conversation. But as far as the hows, that app will help show what time is sunrise in your environment, and then what is the UV index or the UV readout for the light that's outside for you right this second, and then aiming to make sure you're outside for ideally sunrise, UVA rise, and then smatterings of UVB. So what's important about this, and of course, people, I understand there's always certain situations where we can't do that, or shift workers or what have you. But if you're able to design your health and well-being, I like to have people align as much with the rhythms of nature as possible. It's how we live for thousands and thousands of years. And we see benefits in the body by being exposed to that sunrise light, both in the eyes and on the skin for the photoreceptors on the skin with sunrise, and then that UVA rise also seems to cause kind of a impact and a cascade of other hormones, including just your ability to focus throughout the day, general well-being. For women, kind of it supports our fertility and menstrual cycle and other things. So there's surprising benefits. But the how long, here's what we like to do. So say if you can align with this sunrise side of things, then you're aiming to get outside just for a short period of time during sunrise, just to get that light in your eyes and on your skin. So even a few photons of that light can make that difference. So then it kind of triggers and lets you know this is the first kind of real bright shot of light. This is the time to kind of wake up, reset that master clock. Then you can go back inside, and depending on your schedule and what's going on, if possible, then sunrise, get that for just, a few minutes. Go back in, then you're making breakfast. So we're trying to have breakfast within the first hour or so upon awakening, but so fairly quickly, because this is all circadian aligned, intermittent fasting it's known as, but it's really just eating when the sun is out. So now you're eating, and then you're bringing, though, ideally the food outside so that you're having that sun present while you're eating. That sends a whole set of signals is from a quantum biology perspective of what time it is, how to kind of process this food. It supports that glucose management, and then you're getting a longer bulk of time during UVA rise. So I like to have people take a UVA rise walk, or kind of just, even if you're on your phone or whatever and you're outside, doing those things can make that big difference. And then UVB, that's when the sun is stronger. That's when you could burn. So you're being mindful of that, of course, but you still need to get vitamin D more so than a lot of people are doing. And you can only really make it during UVB, which a lot of people don't realize. So getting smatterings of that throughout the course of the day. Now, Andrew Huberman has popularized sort of what he calls a circadian dead zone in more of the afternoon hours, because the cueing of our circadian health is especially rich on that first half of the day. So if you're like, I only have a little bit of time, where should I put this? Then please aim to front load largely. And then if you can get a little bit during sunset, that can also be a helpful cue too, that we're starting to wind down. We had Dr. Sachin Panda out of the Salk Institute on the podcast, and he spoke to the goals to have about an hour of time outside every day to create sufficient melatonin at night and to strongly set that kind of master clock each day. So, but you can kind of break that up as you will. So, you can be going in and outside in the morning hours. If you're driving, you can roll down your windows to get that, kind of real and bright light in your eyes and on your skin. And you're removing sunglasses and other things that could obstruct.
Okay, amazing. And then with that, when we're indoors and we have like these harsh bright lights, especially like overhead ceiling lights, what impact does this play then on our circadian health if we interact with light so much for awake and sleep?
Yeah, such a good question. Hugely, super, super, super important. So great question. Well, one, a few years ago, what was it? About 200 and I want to say around 250 circadian scientists referencing nearly 2,700 peer-reviewed publications were all calling for warning labels on light bulbs when used at night. Yeah. And that's in the nighttime of, kind of brightness when there shouldn't be any brightness by nature. We'd never have that kind of exposure of light, especially even more augmented when it is above you, because that solar angle of light is an impactor. So the bright overhead light doing even more damage, because now it's really confusing the body, because now it's thinking like, is it solar noon? Like what time is it? But it's actually like 10 p.m., but it doesn't feel like it. So it's going to act accordingly to that earlier time range and just mess everything up as far as helping to support melatonin production. So the use of those at night is really marked, not even just for sleep, but certainly for sleep, but also for maybe other surprising things. So diabetes, heart disease, fertility issues, our waistline, mental health disorders. So impacted just our experience of life as a whole. So surprising aspects of health are impacted with that light at night. But then also by day, you're looking to get as bright of light as you possibly can, but you're not looking to ideally just have this bright shot of blue light and it's not balanced with all those other, aspects of the rainbow, because usually in nature, we would always get that beautiful rainbow piece. We would get, you never just have blue light with blue light itself. It would be balanced with infrared light and all the other spectrums of the rainbow. So you're trying to at least dip it in and outside as much as you possibly can. And then if you're really looking to optimize, you're aiming to make sure that the solar angle side of things, that you're getting lower angle light, ideally as we go into the evening hours, so that we're not getting that kind of overhead effect.
Mm-hmm. So then do you have specific light bulbs that you like to use, or are you kind of somebody that likes to turn them off in general?
Yeah, good question. So at night, I like to use incandescent light bulbs. There's a company called Strainless Lighting that has really affordable ones. There's other incandescent light bulbs that you can now get. There was a period when it was kind of like a big difficulty to ascertain these incandescent light bulbs. There was like legality issues around them, but now we're starting to be able to get those. So some people like red LEDs, just aiming to make sure that there's not a ton of flicker with those.
Mm-hmm.
And then candles are a great one, lanterns, that sort of thing. And so we did those for, thousands of years and we forgot about those. So those can be all really great. Now you can do those at night. What I tend to do by day is largely I try to be outside, and I like, it's not always the most convenient. So I'm trying to like bring out like laptops and stuff outside. It might be cold. It might be a mess. It might be whatever. Or setting myself up next to a windows, and I've got lots of windows over here. And that was part of like building biology, I believe, is going to be a big aspect of health and well-being as we move forward, just because we're spending well over 93% of our time indoors. And as a result, that is impacting our biology because the air quality tends to stink inside. The lighting is often not set up to have that strong circadian component. But we are seeing more forward-thinking hospitals and other groups starting to have more circadian aligned lighting, circadian aligned temperature. So there's things that you can do. But yes, if you can kind of fall towards the most common aspect of your day being the getting outside piece or the sitting by a window, that is ideal.
Okay, yeah, this is major, and it's something that I feel like I've actually really struggled with because living where I'm living right now,
Yeah.
when my husband and I signed this lease a few years ago, what we didn't really realize was there's a very little natural light. The windows are facing like not the east and west, and it's a very woodsy area. I live in Western Washington, a lot of trees everywhere.
Mm,
And I've noticed in the past couple of years we've lived here,
yeah.
I've been way more tired and
Yeah.
way more drained. And in the summer,
Yeah.
I can get outside and I like to call like snack walking, like a little walk in the morning, a couple walks in the
Yeah.
afternoon, things like that. But in the winter, it's like it's so rainy here. I get out whenever I can. So there are some days that I
Mm,
might not get outside until 2 p.m. if it clears up. And
mhm.
I'm fatigued. And so I've been thinking about it going into like having a baby and what that could do for this child's circadian rhythm, especially like,
Yeah.
learning to sleep. So we're
Sure.
we're trying to figure it out. It's crazy though, because our lease is up literally 2 weeks after my due date. And we're like, well, that's not gonna work. So we're like starting to look for places and see what we can do. But I've been realizing living here, like how much, you think about the things you're looking for in a home.
Yeah.
And I've realized one thing is like I can never move into another space, whether we're renting or buying, that does not have solid access to natural light, both like
Yes.
east facing and west facing,
Yes.
because it has wrecked my
Yeah.
circadian rhythm. Like
Yes.
truly, it's
Yeah.
crazy.
I love that you're attuned to that because so many people might step over that and they might just be like, oh, it's been a rough couple of years or but no, there's an analogy people will talk about if you take like a plant outside, we take this plant and then put a tarp over it
Mhm.
and we could imagine how it's going to fare. It's not going to really thrive if we're doing that, and we think that we're so much different than that example, and we're not. We are
Mhm.
absolutely creatures of nature, of outdoor living. That's how we have evolved for thousands of years. It's in our DNA. We are designed to really be pretty addicted to the light because we get all these feel good effects from it and wake promoting at the right times when it's present. So the noticing of that is key. Now, for my people that are in northern latitude locations, just even bear in mind because not only are you dealing necessarily, I'm not trying to be bearer of bad news, but also I have things that you can do. But for people to be clear, when you're in northern latitude locations, this is even more important to be attuned to because the strength of the light, and I grew up in Maine, which is right near Canada, and the winters are brutal, and the strength of the sun is much weaker in these northern latitude locations for huge portions of the year. I mean, just in general, because it's having to stretch across the horizon so much longer and further, but also particularly in the winter months. So
Mhm.
in certain places, it could be from like October to around April or so when you cannot get sufficient vitamin D from the sun in the same way. Now, this is where this conversation gets so trippy and it could get way longer, and it's in the quantum space where it looks at, well, how do we do that? How do we manage that in the past? Well, we used to get cold a lot more, and cold would help offset that impact on the mitochondria, and that could
Mhm.
help support with our ability to make light from within, which is really trippy, not like a woo perspective, but just the from a cellular perspective.
Mhm.
And so the needing to, when we have an absence of light, to get cold and then get as much sunlight as we possibly can during those months outside. But we can't all do that. And so if that's the case, there are options. I'm looking at my Mitolux sun lamp right now. So we often have people get things like and there's other ones, Spurty lamp, Chroma D, other ones. But right now I'm liking that Mitolux, and that one will have UVB light present. And so you can actually get, like, you have to be careful with them. You can get burned, you can what have you.
Wow.
But it truly is kind of like harnessing the power of the sun, and it can boost your vitamin D levels from a light source, which is really fascinating that you can possibly do that. And then I do like Chroma is another company that has some very cool light options that are trying as much as we can to mimic the sun and the kind of ratios of like that rainbow light piece. And there's other companies that are doing that too, but Those are some that people could look at that you could invest in, especially more important when you're in the northern latitude locations. And then commonly we are, if we're not outside enough, then we are having some deficiencies in infrared light. And so that's where the power of, those kind of expensive, often big panels of red light that people are getting. But you can get that from the sun if you go outside. There's really rich amounts of infrared present, but you do have to expose your skin, and it's can be hard when it's really cold for big stretches of time. You're only getting like little pieces of your skin exposed. So these can be some things that we could offset. We could use the red light panels. We could use the UVB aspect of things. And then kind of the bad news insight is how to start reframing and embracing the cold more routinely in northern latitude locations, because oddly that's going to help with mitochondrial function, brown fat. So brown fat, we seem to get more of that when we are exposed to cold. And so the presence of all of that can help offset, and then just forcing you to be outside longer, because even if the strength of the sun is less, there can be a bit of that cumulative effects of, so say, if we're down closer near the equator, and I'm down here in Texas, that the power of the sun is a bit stronger. So it's less time outside for that dosing. But when the sun is weaker in northern latitude locations, we want to be outside just a bit longer, and then embracing and kind of reframing like, okay, this cold is good for me. This cold is good for me. And we were meant to be exposed to that. We'd see Inuit populations and what have you. And so this is where it can get really, really fascinating, this kind of quantum biology conversation. But I love what you're saying about, for your next space, having the sun be a part of that conversation. And then also just even like in your environment. So, I'm like on a hill type situation. So my husband and I will walk up the hill in the morning, and then we get even better unobstructed views of the sun. So kind of finding where that might be in your space, and you can use that as part of like your walking path or your running path or whatever, to kind of get that exposure to it, because totally like that happens for a lot of people, but I don't want people to be left with like, oh, I have to have it so optimized, because there's always things we can work around.
Yeah. Okay. I'm so glad to hear that. Yeah. I recently got a loom box for Christmas, so I've been definitely like enjoying my red light. And then,
Oh, good.
because I've tried so many, I was like, I really just need a high quality one. So all the ones I've had were like the cheaper ones that really did nothing. And so it was nice to have one that like I actually feel like works. But yeah, I mean, I've been realizing how much I need the sun. My husband's totally the same. And there is also the conversation that we've been opening a lot about, like, maybe we don't want to stay in Washington forever, because we're both like such like, we could live on the beach year round. Like I would never get sick of the sun. So we've been really thinking about what that looks like. So then moving to like another kind of light that I'm really fascinated with, the blue light, and then just the technology in general. I used to be so guilty of plugging in my phone next to my bed, and just like sliding it under my pillow and sleeping like that.
Yes.
And it wasn't until after college, when I started working in content and started working with an EMF protection company that I still work with today. It's amazing. But I started learning about EMF and blue light from our phones, and like the impact of a clean sleep space when it comes to tech. So for all these people who are like sleeping with their phone next to their beds, or sleeping with their phones charging next to their beds, have tech in the room, looking at their phones right before bed, what could that be doing to their sleep?
So good. And just real quick too, because I realize I want to make sure I don't leave people with like, oh my God, I'm like up in Canada and I'm never going to sleep well.
Sure.
Now I do see there, because there has been, and I've been in these spaces, like in the quantum biology space, sometimes people will be like, you got to move south. You got to move south. You just have to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I think there's, like anything, there's always nuance. And one, we can test our haplotype. We can understand what is our kind of heritage, because some people are, have a background where they have lighter skin and they are not as kind of dependent on getting as much of that strong sunlight. And there's a saying, you can get well at any latitude. And so, I want people to know that there's always things we can do. There's always workarounds, but to also not be, living kind of like an ostrich and not realizing that where you choose to live can have very real world consequences on
Mhm.
your biology, on your health. So I think it's great what you're doing. You're like really being thoughtful and investigating, like, what do I want? How do I want to design my life? And my environment plays such a huge role in that. So, want to make sure I leave that. And then, on the topic of EMFs, screens, blue light, huge. Yeah. So I'd say one, screens and light sources. That one, so funny. So in every kind of community, there's always kind of infighting. And in the sleep community, there's a bit of infighting in a couple of these topics, because some people say, well, it's not as much the light as it is the content and the
Mhm.
activation and kind of like the splintered attention and like anything you will look at it like on social media or screens or what have you tends to have quick action nowadays. And, we're trained in like social media stuff. Oh, you got to change, the content every 2 seconds, every
Mhm.
1 second, like, because everyone's just so splintered attention and nuts. So because of that, it can be very activating. So certainly the content being a big piece. But then I would argue still that even if people are saying, this conversation of light, if the brighter and the closer this light source is, the more it can impact the activation of sort of neurotransmitters, but certainly our stress response, cortisol, and the ability to make melatonin. So either way, what I like to have people do is with screens, turn on kind of red light options, and there's hidden settings on iPhone to triple click on the side, so that it just becomes red. And then if you have an Android, there's other apps that you can get, Twilight app and other things that can make your whole screen totally red. If you're using a laptop, you can use things like iris.co. And so these can make things totally red, and it's like fire light. And so you don't have to really worry about that piece as much. But the screen activation piece is definitely going to play a role too. So they're both together. And then on top of that, this is the very controversial one, is the EMF piece, because some people will say it's totally fine. It's absolutely fine. Blah, blah, blah. And then other people will say that, there's a vested interest in the telecommunications industry. So this can get even political because there's a lot of money behind the telecommunications industry, to be able to have an internet of things, to have your whole space be the smart space. So this is where it can get dicey. But I think when it comes to sleep, what you're talking about is key. Like, you don't need to be using your phone, your laptop, your Wi-Fi, all these things while you're sleeping. So bare minimum, even controversy aside, it makes a lot of sense to just remove that as a variable, because we do have concerns. Could that be impacting melatonin? We have certain research. We need more research. We don't have a lot of money behind a lot of this other, conflicting research, but there are questions of, could EMFs impact melatonin production, other aspects of health. There's a lot there. So why not create an environment? I had a building biologist on our podcast that advocated for an 8-foot bubble around your bed, a virtual, in your
Love
mind
that.
bubble, right? Yeah. So you can just kind of picture, okay, I'm clearing this all out so that I can, because we know with EMFs, this part's clear, that the proximity is the poison, if you will, and it has such a dramatic drop off the further away you go from the source.
Mhm.
So if we can just at least remove those source points, that can just, everyone can kind of agree that that can make a difference. So there's that. But then you can get into the building biology aspect of things. You can have a strong building biologist come and evaluate your space, because then there are tons of stories of people realizing, oh my God, the smart meter was like right here, right behind my headboard. And then we, rearrange things, move things around, or in some cases move. But if we're having strong, the magnetic piece of things, magnetism is a measurable piece. So you can look at the specific EMFs. But then you can also look at other aspects of your environment. You can look at your air quality. You can look at ventilation. You can look at molds, CO2 levels. A lot can be there. And then you can also look at the position of your bed. Are you elevated? Can that help with your breathing throughout the course of the night? Lots of different ways that you can kind of take your environment into your own hands. And then being mindful of the light, we're looking for it to be kind of this dark, cool, quiet, cave-like environment. And really not being able to see the hand in front of your face. And if you can still see your hand, kind of taking some steps to eliminate that and make a difference there.
Okay, this is interesting to me. So I actually used to, well, pre-pregnancy, especially like years ago, I really struggled with insomnia for years, like for my entire life. And I was so bad about tech in the room, obviously, like most teenagers and college students. And then in my young 20s, it was just a habit I had formed. Like nobody around me had an old-fashioned alarm clock, right? Like that wasn't really a thing. And it wasn't until I made strides to have a tech-free room that I really, I started sleeping better. But then, of course, there's so many factors. Like, when I couldn't sleep, I would wake up and open up Instagram or check my texts, right? And so there's like that stimulation, there's the light, there's the tech, there's the fact that it's charging, which if you're, for people who are listening who aren't like EMF aware, when you're charging your devices, the EMF is so much stronger. And then I also started putting like Aries tech devices everywhere. And that made a huge difference for me. I mean, I have like massive ones all over my room, and that's become a non-negotiable for me. So, I mean, at least personally, I felt a really big difference in eliminating all tech from my sleep environment. So do you recommend, like, do you have, like any good EMF-free alarm clock recommendations for people? Because I know that some people can wake up with the sun, which is great. Some people might not be able to for like work schedules or whatever reason. And I know that, even some alarm clocks have like different smart capabilities. Do you have any that you like that are just a clean one for the space?
Yeah, good questions. And I love that you're being a bit of a sleep leader by kind of bringing that into your space. And yes. If just the underscoring that kind of concept of that 8-foot bubble or beyond, certainly including that removal of the cell phone and also anything that might be like charging. So one thing that looks weird in our space is we don't have any like lights on the side of the beds or anything because just even plugging in right next to your head, like you don't need it, and half the time if you are, because I'd like to have for most people not spending too much extra time in your bedroom unless you're really sleeping in there because you're kind of trying to train yourself a bit that it's just a place to sleep and that's like the psychological relationship to it. So you really shouldn't need too much of that extra light in there regardless. Anyway, so setting that up, and then for having external alarms, great concept, great idea. And so we often see battery charge ones being really helpful, or nowadays you can get some that will have can be charged, but then can run without the actual being plugged in piece. So then you're minimizing more of the EMFs. Now there are tons of companies that have very fancy pants alarms, but I have not endorsed a lot of them because many of them are just inviting more EMFs into your space because they're all like smart tech and they look so pretty and they're so nice. But then it's just like we need another set of EMF, promoting things like a hole in the head. Especially in the bedroom space. So tends to be more these low tech items and just these old school alarms that are with the battery piece and or the charging component. Now just being mindful that you just want to be responsible and checking in on your battery life periodically, because I know that's always a fear. We don't want any more anticipatory anxiety for people of like, well, is my alarm going to die in the night or whatever? And then I also see people often have kind of backups with the phones, but in another room. Or like far, far away from your bed. So say if you do have it charging in the bathroom instead of the bedroom or something, then having kind of backup alarms on there in case there's like fears with some of that. And then there can be, people will get into some of these like fancy, crazy alarms where there's some where you have to go like into the whatever, the bathroom or something, stand on these mats and, or other ways to kind of get yourself up and out of bed. But ultimately, to your point, if we're looking for the low EMF source, those can be all some options, but also just we're trying to kind of remove the stand. Like when you go to a hotel, it's like I basically am always unplugging everything that's kind of all around the bed. And so you're
Mhm.
trying to unplug all those standard things. And usually there's that standard plug-in alarm clock, there's the standard lamp sources, chargers, as you were pointing to, all of that stuff. And we're trying to just separate all of that for ourselves.
Yeah, at hotels, it annoys me endlessly how they always have charging ports, like, on the bedside table between the
Yeah.
beds or, like,
Yes.
whatever. I'm like, "This
Yes.
is absolutely insane." So I'll be
I
the person,
know.
like, charging on the other side of the room
Yeah.
or charging it before bed, to make sure it's, like, not charging while I'm sleeping. I'm super anal about that. So then
Yes.
kind of on this whole topic of sleep environment
Yeah.
mattering. I've been hearing, I've heard like Dave Asprey talk about and other people talk about how sleeping in a colder environment is more conducive to better, deeper sleep. Is this true?
Oh my God. I love that you asked that. Yes, it is. It's so true. And actually, people always get, not always, but I see some people get irked by this. Is that we're looking for quite markedly colder than a lot of people are doing. So about 60 to 67 degrees is what we're going for
Mm,
in the ambient temperature. And then we're looking for, on top of that, often cooling mattress toppers can make such a difference in if you're measuring with wearables, with Aura or Whoop or what have you, and dropping that heart rate and improving that HRV, heart rate variability. So it's really fascinating the difference that cold can make, but also not just beyond those measurements, also subjectively tends to be much less wake ups throughout the course of the night, much less fragmentation, um, and then often improvements in deep sleep as a result. Now, I will say on wearables, some of the least accurate information are those sleep stage classifications. So understanding that, but often even just from a trends-based perspective, you can typically see based on their current algorithm. Sometimes they change their algorithms and the whole other thing. But when with that current algorithm, you can see when there's a bump in that deep or REM or both, and temperature is one of the few things that makes such an overnight difference, clearly. And so I think there's honestly, like, I get so many gadgets because I've run Sleep as a Skill for almost over a decade, or hitting about a decade. So I've gotten so many gadgets over the years and supplements and all the things, and very little of these interventions make much of a measurable difference on wearable data
mm.
beyond like that temperature, as far as just like overnight. Now, I'm not saying that there's not tons of other things you can do, but I'm saying for immediate and clear cause an effect, that's a huge one.
Okay, yeah, I definitely started doing that in the past year or 2, and I love it. I love, like, because I feel like if I'm in a hot room, I'm
Yeah.
waking up in the middle of the night, taking layers off, but if I'm in a cold room, I feel like a little baby bear, like, you can always just wrap up in your comforter, and it's so
Yeah.
relaxing once you warm it up yourself. So I felt that, and then so, okay, on all the gadgets, have you tried mouth tape? Like, is this something that you're a fan of for sleep?
Yes, yes, mouth tape is a fascinating one. It's another controversial one in the sleep community, believe it or not.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is that one of the reasons is we don't want people stepping over sleep disorders and then just using the tape, because there are cases when it can actually make it worse.
Mm.
So just being aware of that. If you are dealing with acute sleep apnea, if you have upper air resistance syndrome, if you are dealing with pronounced snoring, et cetera. Now, this can make such a difference for that mouth breathing, training to nasal breathe. I wear mouth tape just about every night. And yet, we want to make sure that we aren't stepping over those sleep disorders and potentially augmenting things. So, testing, and you can do this for about 150 bucks or so. I think I might have mentioned Lofta, Empower Sleep. Other companies can allow you to test with just like a watch or ring. And in the process of doing that, then you can just kind of clear yourself and know, okay, much more likely good to go to be able to bring in this tape. Now, once we do, so there are many cases where people have sleep apnea, upper air resistance syndrome, snoring, and bruxism, et cetera. And then once we're treated that, so whether it's the oral appliances or myofunctional therapies, both, some people are doing CPAP and other things. Now, I do want people to always know there's ways that we can reduce the severity so that you're not just, kind of throwing on a appliance and then doing nothing, because there's tons of things you can do. But these are, you can often use mouth tape with these in conjunction. So it can be kind of a layered topic. But for the average person, if you're not dealing with any of that, that can really, really be fascinating, because it can help train that nasal breathing to be a bit more of like a muscle memory experience.
Yeah, I like it's interesting because I personally love it. And I ran out and accidentally ordered it to my parents' house because we share an Amazon. And
I
so
did
I've been
the same thing. That's
I
so
know.
weird. I did the same thing. It was with my husband's family. And they're like, what is this? Because I had gotten like the
Yeah.
medical kind and like
Yeah.
with the silicone thing. And they're like, yeah, okay. So you did
What the heck
that?
is this? Yeah, and so I've been waiting for just to see them to get it. And I've noticed I'm not sleeping as well. And I feel like I wake up with because I'm on my left side trying to stay
Mhm.
there and everything's weird. And I'm like, okay, I
Yeah.
miss my mouth tape. But then for my husband, who I think has either sleep apnea or like upper air resistance, something,
Yes.
he has a harder time like nasal breathing, especially at night.
Yes.
I've been really trying to get him to see a specialist to kind of figure that out. So for someone like that, I mean, I feel like if you go to the doctor, they're just going to tell you to get a CPAP. And so
Yeah.
you're saying that like are there some maybe more approachable and holistic things that people could do right away if they suffer with either of those?
Yeah, great questions. So one, I would say, yes, we still see this tendency of many sleep labs kind of being this like drive-by CPAP
Yeah.
organization. It's like, oh, well, we want to tell you a CPAP. Um, and yet, so it's very nuanced. So first off, tonight you could download the Snore Lab app and just at least get some data on how much he's snoring and what times. Are we seeing a lot in the morning hours? Is it night? What's going on? So that can at least arm us with a little bit of information right off the bat. Then we can test. And then with the test, depending on where it might fall, mild, moderate, severe, if we're talking about sleep apnea, um, then it opens up windows or opportunities to treat it differently depending on how severe. So commonly, so say if people get their test results back and it's like mild sleep apnea, first up, I think they need to change the name, because everyone thinks, oh, it's mild, it's not, I don't have to do anything. But no, that can mean that you're like 10 times an hour choking, basically. So it's
Wow.
like a big deal. And that's just mild, like let alone moderate to severe. Severe can be like, 50 something times an hour where you are choking. And so imagine how great your sleep would be there. And we know that that is going to absolutely shorten your lifespan, shorten the quality of your life. It directly impacts cardiovascular health right away, but not to mention kind of neurodegenerative disorders, all kinds of things, mood, etc. So the testing for that, and then once you get those results back, there's a whole world of things that you can do. And even if for some people they might say if it's really severe, they might get a CPAP for a stretch of time, but then during, just to get some relief over these really profoundly disruptive apneas, but then committing to, in the process, learning, educating, and taking steps to reduce the severity, and that can take time. So you might do myofunctional training, so it might be building up the musculature. You might try things like Excite OSA. My husband uses that. He has mild sleep apnea, so Excite OSA is a daytime treatment, and it basically zaps your tongue. It strengthens your tongue muscles, helps your tongue stay at the roof of your mouth so that it's not falling lax and back into your
Mm.
throat. Then if there's nasal issues, because I think you were mentioning that too, I got done something called Vivair, and I recorded this on social, and it took about 20 minutes, and super cool. And they use radio frequency to reshape your nasal passages while you're awake.
Wow.
It's really neat, and it can often be covered under insurance depending on what state and coverage you have. But even if it's out of pocket, mine was out of pocket. It can, depending on the person who's doing it, the doctor and whatever, it can sometimes be around like $2,000, $3,000. But as far as like a quote unquote kind of surgery or, medical intervention, it's more affordable than a lot of things that you might get done. And that was really transformative. So for me, it fixed a slight deviated septum in about 20 minutes. So it's really amazing.
That's
So,
amazing. Well, and I know a lot of people who are scared of deviated septum surgery because they just don't want to go under the knife if it's
yeah.
not necessary. So I feel like
Yeah.
that also kind of takes away that fear and the risk
Yeah.
involved with like any surgery, getting to do something with RF when you're awake.
Yeah, exactly. And it was so cool because I had a flat screen in the office, and so the doctor would be showing me like as he's going in, so you could see the inside. So it's like a little camera, and so you could see the whole inside of your nose while the whole thing's
Wow.
happening, and you're like awake for you're fully there for the whole thing. So that can be really fast. And then it gets into other things too, like tongue tie releases. So I had a tongue tie, so I got that released. There can be all kinds of things that can also be further obstructing. But in case of like your husband, learning about those, and there's other, you can get like, there's certain things that can expand your nasal passageways. You can get ones with magnets, intake breathing. There's some that you can fully like nasal dilators. So there can be in between things. But if you want like a longer term solution, something like Vivere, or in some cases, the full surgery, depending, can make a big difference. So yes, breathing is huge for sleep and really under recognized.
Okay, this is so fascinating. And as soon as we get off of this talk, I'm gonna like deep dive on that because I've been
Oh,
trying so hard to help him come up with a solution, even selfishly, because a lot of times he'll start mouth breathing, and I'm like, I'll
yes.
wake him up with like stop mouth breathing like 100 times a night. The poor guy, he's gonna be so mad when he hears this. But I'm like, obviously it's not his fault. So I'm like, I want to help
Yeah.
him come up with a solution because I know it's also not great for his own sleep. So this is all super helpful. Okay, I know that you have to run today. So last question that I have to ask all the experts. So what is your current health and wellness goal?
Oh, I love that. Well, actually, I had let my leptin levels get low, so I
Mhm.
need to be raising those up because what I was doing was um, traveling, business stress, all the things, and so now I have to build my leptin levels up a little bit. But it's kind of a fun thing because then you just have to eat a little bit more, eat more carbs, and that sort of thing. So I'm like, I can do that.
Yeah,
I can totally do that.
easy.
Now, it's not the only thing. There's the circadian aligned things, depending on what people are dealing with. But yeah, I really love this principle of kind of testing, staying aligned with, and seeing some of your
Mhm.
trends. And then I'm also working on bringing in more zone 2 with like rucking and going up hills and that sort of thing. So just zone 2 training for heart health and HRV management. So adding more of those things in.
Amazing. And where can people find you? I feel like a lot of people are going to want to go deeper because I know you have so many resources for helping people get better sleep. So, how do they connect with you?
Yes. So sleepisaskill.com can act as a good bucket for a lot of things. You can take a sleep assessment. You can sign up for our Sleep Obsessions newsletter. It's been running for 7 years every Monday. And then you can do our cohort, participate in our sleep cohort, work one-on-one. We have sleep audits, so we can audit your wearable trackers or even just your sleep in general. And then we have, one-on-one packages beyond that. And then on that same website at the bottom, you can always follow us on social as well. So if you search Sleep as a Skill or Molly Eastman, that will all come up as well to go, more down the rabbit hole on all these topics.
Amazing. Okay, well, I'm super fascinated by this. So, you guys, if you listened to this episode and you loved it, make sure to check out Sleep as a Skill. I know I will be looking at it for myself, for my
Yay.
husband, for my family, because I
Great.
think this is something that everyone can benefit from, whether you like are
Yes.
more of just like a biohacker trying to optimize or you're really struggling. I feel like
Yeah.
everyone can look to improve their sleep a little bit.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And just take on that ethos that sleep is a skill set. So, building up that aptitude, we can all do.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for joining me, Molly. I learned so much today, and I'm so glad we got to
Yay.
connect.
Oh, me too. Amazing. Well, if in your journeys and possible relocation, if you find yourself over in Austin, please, reach out and we can always connect more.
Absolutely will. Well, you guys, thank you so much for listening, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Until next time, we will chat soon.